Hello, good afternoon. I hope you've been well. I wanted to go through on this video here about basically being able to criticize yourself, and not in a hatred or a mean way, in a way that you can critique yourself to be better, and also being able to listen to people's opinions about you, or just being able to recognize when you are in the wrong. And I think this is a really important subject that a lot of us need to have a little bit more of a self-awareness and also not get so angry or defensive when somebody is coming to you and saying, I don't like this behavior from you, and also this hurt me. Could we, talk about this? And instead of getting defensive or running away and trying to say that they're in the wrong, I think it takes a lot of guts to be vulnerable and step in your tracks and be like, or stop yourself in your tracks and be like, yeah, actually, you know what? I was incorrect about that. That behavior wasn't okay. So I'm going to give you some kind of examples of maybe when you have done this in your life, and why you should go forward and be vulnerable. So I have been reading a book by, I can never say her last name right, so I don't want to obviously say it, but this chick also has a podcast, and this is how I found her. I also read her other book, which is The Neuroscience of Self-Love. And so this is her newest book, which is How to Chase Change. And basically I'm reading it because I want to change as a person. I don't like my habits. I don't like my current routines, and there's a lot of things that I want to change. There's a lot of things I love about myself, but also I want to be better. So, and everybody can. And so I realized in one of the parts of the book, and it was about basically self-awareness. So it was saying, learn self-awareness and the key to unlocking your progress. Okay, so cool. And then I get to this part in the book, and it was so interesting because it reminded me of a certain human being that I have had to deal with recently. And this person, it was so weird. Okay, so I will explain the situation. So one time when this person offended me and said something quite rude to me, this is a guy I was dating, and I came to him the next day and I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to attack him on this, so I'm going to try and do this in the best way possible. We were walking to the beach, and we were just walking down the street, and I was like, hey, I just wanted to let you know that the way that you said what you said to me last night was not really fair, and I just didn't really like the way that you spoke to me, just because I personally wouldn't have spoken to you that way. And, it really did hurt me, and for you to think A, B, and C about me, and was hurtful. And he literally said nothing to me. He just was so quiet, and then he was he twisted it and manipulated it into a situation where I was in the wrong, and then triggered me purposely so that I would get upset, and then goes, see, I knew it. I knew you would get triggered by this. And then I ended up having to be the one that apologized. And what I recognized in that is that anytime I came to this person, even when we were going through a hard time with our breakup, I would go to him and be like, hey, could we talk about this? I really want to talk about your behavior and the way that you were, acting really quite mean to me the other day. He would twist it and call me a narcissist, call me, it was just easier for him to not take criticism from anybody, because of this line. So I'll repeat it, and it really hit me because I was like, whoa, this makes so much sense. So accepting criticism will make you exposed. True. And the defensive impulse is telling you that if you admit that you are wrong in this one instance, then you'll lose credibility. And this person you disagree with will now believe that you are wrong in everything else. And if this happens, it will mean that they will have the upper hand and you will have, quote unquote, lost. But relationships are not a contact sport. So true. And there is no scoreboard. Being vulnerable is never as bad as you predict it will be. There is always a silver lining to being vulnerable. Let me be clear. The fear of vulnerability is very real, but the more you avoid it, the scarier it becomes. Not only are you suffering internally, which I could tell he was, you avoid change, which he definitely does. You're avoiding growth, but you may also be harming your relationships unintentionally because it is so difficult for you to admit being wrong. And that is like literally our relationship. He never wanted to be wrong, in the wrong, had done something wrong. That's why I never heard an apology from him. I never heard him, take any accountability for anything, because if you take accountability, you're vulnerable. So it was easier for him to be defensive. And in that moment, and I never understood it, why he would be like this. But then I realized when I read that, I was like, whoa, that makes so much sense. Like, he would literally think that everything, because he's obviously insecure, lol, that he would lose credibility for everything he's ever said. I wouldn't ever think that. I have had moments, so many moments in beautiful relationships that have been really healthy and like good communication, where partners have admitted they fucked up, or I have. It was like, okay, it's just not just about them. Sorry. There's times where I've put my hand up and I've gone, I shouldn't have spoken to you that way. That was, that was really unfair for me to get up on you about that. And in those moments, I have found that partners will respect me more and they will love you more in those moments, because they realize, like, I like the vulnerability. I like the fact that you can put your hands up, you can take accountability, when you're wrong, and we can move on. And I genuinely think most human beings are like that. Literally, like unless you're like super twisted and are like, yeah, I told you, see, then that person is so twisted and they're taking your accountability and trying to make you the bad person, which also this guy that I used to date used to do that to me. If I was like, hey, because he would say stuff like, oh, you're just like really controlling, which I'm just like have never thought of. But then I tried to reflect and I was like, hey, why would someone say I'm controlling? And then I thought of moments, I'm like, yeah, do you know what? Maybe I do try to control things. And I probably try to control things because I don't want chaos and I really want peace and I really want things to just be nice. So maybe I can have controlling traits. And because I had so much chaos in my childhood, for me, it's just easier for me to be like, actually, I just need to control this situation. And, I was listening to a book at the time and I was like, oh, maybe I do have controlling tendencies. This is something I can work on. And also when you're trying to let go of certain things, and if you have not less control, but if you're not trying to be controlling, you kind of let the universe do its thing. If you're not trying to control the narrative all the time. And I'm very much deep into like spirituality, and not deep into it. I believe in spirituality. And I think that you have to also allow things to plan out naturally and not have control over the narrative of the future and that kind of thing if you want, I don't know, abundance and da-da-da-da. So I was like, at the time I was listening to a book and I felt that, and I was like, you know what, maybe I am controlling. So when I went and apologized to him, I said, I'm really, you know what, I'll put my hands up. I'm really sorry that if you felt that I was a controlling person, it's really not how I was trying to come across. I've become aware of it, and it was something I can definitely work on. He twisted that and goes, see, I told you. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm never actually going to win with you. I'm never going to win with people like you. But this episode is not about him, and it's not about the way that he was treating me. This episode is literally about you being vulnerable and taking criticism from people. So that was kind of the example I wanted to give. And it is easier, and it is kinder, and it is better. Like, I've had times where there was times in my life where I had done wrong by, like lying to a partner and I wasn't completely honest about a lot of things. And then I went and told them. And in that moment, we were able to decide if we were going to move forward together. And we could, because I was honest about it. But when you are, I don't know, deceiving about stuff or lying about stuff or holding back information purposely and not being vulnerable, I just feel like there is just a block in connection that happens when you're like that. And it just doesn't feel quite right. You know what I mean? Some other things that I wanted to note that I wrote down here as well is that when you are vulnerable, and that can feel like a lot, our brain will kind of be like our brain will exaggerate basically that the outcome of us being vulnerable will be rejection or shame or loss of respect. But really, I just feel like every time someone's been vulnerable to me or been honest and taken accountability from something, I'll name a situation. So one time I was I would say long distance dating, maybe not even long distance dating this guy. And without even getting into too much details, I was going to fly over to Australia. I was in New Zealand at the time and I was going to go see him. And then I had bought my tickets and I was messaged him. I was like, are you sure? Are you 100% sure you want me to come over? And it was his birthday in a couple of weeks or whatever. And he was like, yes, I would love you to be there. Then he called me kind of I don't know, 3 days later. And he was like, I need to be honest with you. I've gone back with my ex, even though she cheated on him. And I was just I just said to him, I said, good luck, because it sounds really toxic. I was like, I don't even want any part of it. So got a refund on my ticket, luckily. Didn't actually ever go and see him. And I think we just didn't speak because I was just so butthurt, obviously. And he said something like, oh, I would love you to be there at my birthday anyway. And I was like, why would I be there in a hotel room by myself, watching you get back with your ex, being at this party? To me, that sounds insane. But I don't know what his thought process was. Anyway, going forward, years later, I get a message. Well, I think he added me on Instagram again or something like that. And I messaged him and I accepted and I said, what do you want? I was like, what do you want? Is something wrong sort of thing. And he wrote out this huge apology. And then he was like, can I call you? And I was like, yeah. And actually after the apology, I said to him, I said, in that moment, I couldn't even have been angry at him because I was like, it's been years, first of all, but I really appreciate that you've come back 3 years later and kind of said, I'm actually sorry for hurting you. And I recognize that I hurt you and you're a really good person and, whatever else. And I just messaged him back and I said, yeah, thank you. The fact that you've taken accountability, and I was just I can't fault you. I was like, I'm not going to fault you on that. I was like, if anything, you've gained more respect for me. And then he's like, yeah, can I call you? So we had a chat. And it was just really nice to just catch up with somebody. And now we're friends to this day, So I think that, even though it didn't work out in a relationship sense, I didn't lose him as a friend. And he was okay to put his hand up and go, yeah, I was wrong. And I respected him so much more in that moment because I was like, yay, great, perfect. You just recognize what you did wrong and that's awesome. Good on you. You have self-awareness to just get up and be like, yeah, I'm really, really sorry that I hurt you. And I think that is just such a beautiful thing. Have more self-awareness. People need to have just more self-awareness. And coming with that is just you have to learn to accept that you are going to get criticized by people. You are not, nobody is fucking perfect. You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. We're not perfect. We're going to fuck up. We're going to hurt people. We're going to do things that are not going to be kind. And if you can recognize and say, yeah, actually, you know what? In that moment, I was really selfish. You know what? I just did think about myself. And if you can do that, it is going to be a million times better for you. the example that Alexis actually gave in this book, which was like really interesting, was the example of, she called it radioactive jealousy, which basically means that when somebody is jealous of your past, like but jealous of your exes or whatever, even though it was in your past, and so they get so caught up on your exes and needing the validation from you, like as a partner, to, I don't know, basically make sure that they're like better than them, which is like the most insane thing ever. So he, even though this guy had been with this girl for like 15 years, he was still like 15 years later still so jealous of her past. And so she just stopped talking about the past, but it was like he kept asking questions, but she knew what the result would be, keep getting jealous. And it was breaking down their marriage. And then it took him to be accepting of criticism and also have a bit of self-awareness that this was actually harming his relationship, and being able to say that he was wrong and that he was vulnerable. And in that moment he goes, yes, I am jealous and I don't know why, and I want to make this work and I don't want to be this person. And in that moment it was like probably healing for him to say it out loud, and then they could both just move forward, which it sounded like they did. And there's something in here as well. She said, not to mention how attractive it is when someone does this for you, like meaning that they have the willingness to expose themselves. It's such a powerful choice that everybody benefits from, which is true. And also it does, she says, it oozes self-confidence and self-awareness. And yeah, like I feel like it is so sexy to me when somebody can have the self-confidence and the self-awareness to realize that they've done wrong, realize that they're not perfect, because nobody's perfect. I would so rather be with a partner like that, and to have that safety to talk to somebody. It feels okay when you can just sit down and talk to somebody and be like, hey, this wasn't quite right and this is how I felt about it, like what are your thoughts? And for someone to, sometimes it really hurts in the moment when someone says something like to you, you naturally do get defensive. You naturally do go, I wouldn't do that. But if you can just like sit there in the moment, sit there in the discomfort and be like, give me a moment to think about that. I'll come back to you, because it obviously does mean something to you and it obviously is hurting you. And I would have been wrong, and if you can go away and just like process it, and then maybe you could realize that you are in the wrong. Maybe you could realize that what you're doing is shitty, the jealousy, I don't know, who knows what you've done. But if you're in a situation at the moment where someone is, and also it takes a lot for the other person to come and sit there and talk to you about that as well, it really does. It's a vulnerable situation for the other person to come and admit to you that your behavior is not aligned with how they feel. And you should also accept that as well and make that a safe space for that person to be able to come to you. Because in the end, if you can still make that safe for them, and then they can still come to you and chat to you about those things, it's like that builds so much like trust between the both of you to be like, okay, cool, we can have difficult conversations. And I think a lot of people just avoid difficult conversations. Why are you avoiding a difficult conversation? Just get it done. Get it over and done with. I've definitely had moments, I've had friendships that I've lost because I just never had the conversation. I never had the conversation that they hurt me. I can remember one particular friend where she was super, super avoidant of like a lot of things. And I lived with her for a year and we barely spoke. And I got so scared to even like come to her because like she didn't make anything feel safe for me to sit and be like, you're actually being a fucking shit friend. Like, you don't ask me how my day is. You've never asked me. And it hurt, like the way she treated me. And it hurt. And like, it was like a breakup when I like finally got away from her. It hurt for like a year. Even afterwards, I still had to process why someone would treat me like that. And it was like, I just didn't go and talk to them. And I should have done. So yeah, try and make that safe for them as well. But anyway, I wanted to close this off on a kind of thing where it's like, first of all, like, are you seeking self-awareness? Is that something that you are learning? Are you trying to unlock that? And if it is, I think that you need to take criticism from people and don't be so defensive. Anyway, love you. Thank you so much for listening to me, and wherever you are, I'll see you soon.